You've heard the legends. King Solomon, the wisest man to ever walk the earth, a king bathed in unimaginable wealth, whose intellect and judgment echoed across empires, the divine architect of the first temple of Jerusalem, a sacred structure crafted to honor the Most High. But what if the man we revere for his godly wisdom held a secret far more chilling than the world dares to accept? What if Solomon's greatness wasn't solely divine, but also infernal? Beneath the shining marble and sacred altars, could there lie a terrifying truth? That Solomon harnessed an ancient forbidden power that granted him authority over not only men, but demons. The pages of the Bible paint Solomon as a man endowed with a supernatural understanding, a wisdom granted from on high. Yet between those lines are echoes, hints of something far deeper, far darker. And in the shadows of ancient history lies a document the mainstream fears to acknowledge, the Testament of Solomon. This forbidden text unveils a version of the king that no Sunday sermon dares to mention, not merely a wise ruler, but a sorcerer king, a man who wielded an enchanted ring bestowed by a celestial being, granting him power to summon, interrogate, and enslave demons, forcing them to build his temple brick by infernal brick. The testament is more than just old parchment. It's a grim inventory of the underworld. Inside we find detailed confessions of spirits bound by Solomon's will, their arcane names, the twisted roles they play in tormenting humanity, the cosmic rules that limit their reach, and the precise incantations that brought them to heel. Through its pages we don't just learn about demons, we hear their voices, their fears, their grudging obedience to a mortal king wielding divine and diabolical power. Solomon didn't just rule over Israel, he ruled over the darkness. What's most disturbing is not the tales themselves, but the implications they carry. If Solomon truly possessed the power to command evil, what does that say about the temple he built and the God it was built to honor? Could it be that beneath its sacred foundations lie traces of something more sinister? Was the temple of God also a prison for fallen spirits, a gateway sealed by Solomon's ring? And if so, what would happen should that seal ever break? This isn't myth, this isn't fantasy. This is a confrontation with a forgotten truth, a version of biblical history stripped from the official canon, locked away in the vaults of forbidden knowledge. A truth that challenges the clear-cut line we draw between holy and unholy, between light and shadow. The forbidden ring wasn't just a tool. It was a symbol of the delicate, terrifying balance between heavenly authority and demonic power, a balance Solomon walked with divine precision. As we journey into the chilling corridors of this ancient text, we must ask ourselves, what was the true source of Solomon's power? Was he a servant of God? Or something more, something darker? Prepare to step into the unknown, where history, theology, and the occult converge. The demons have spoken, and the temple still echoes with their whispers. The remarkable saga of Solomon's supernatural authority over infernal beings begins not with a war or a crown, but with a divine commission and a gift forged in the heavens. According to the Testament of Solomon, this gift was not imagined nor symbolic. It was tangible, real, a ring delivered directly from the celestial realms by none other than the Archangel Michael, bearing the sacred seal of God himself. But this was no ornament of royalty. This was a spiritual weapon, a divine instrument of control capable of bending the wills of demons. With this ring, Solomon held in his hand the power to dominate the darkest spirits of creation, not for personal gain, but as a vessel to execute the will of the Almighty on earth. This divine intervention wasn't arbitrary. It was triggered by a very real and sinister event, the silent cry of a suffering soul. A young boy, a humble laborer, assisting in the temple's construction, found himself stalked by an invisible predator. Night after night, his strength faded, his face grew pale, his spirit drained. The cause was not illness. It was a demon, a vampiric entity named Orneus, a malicious being who siphoned life from the boy under the cover of darkness. The ancient text describes how Ornius would steal the youth's vitality through the thumb of his right hand, leaving behind a shell of despair. The boy's agony grew unbearable, and in his desperation he turned to the one man on earth who might intervene, King Solomon. Solomon, already renowned for his God-given wisdom, did not act as a mere king. He acted as a priest-warrior, standing between light and darkness. Recognizing the spiritual nature of the attack, Solomon cried out to the Lord for help, and heaven responded. The archangel descended, bearing the ring, a key to dominion over demons. With this ring in his possession, Solomon was transformed. No longer just a ruler of men, he became a master of spirits, and Ornius, the tormentor, would become the first of many to fall under his divine command. What began as an act of mercy toward a single laborer quickly expanded into a spiritual campaign. The ring became Solomon's weapon of choice, not to destroy, but to bind, interrogate, and ultimately force demonic forces into servitude. These demons, once agents of torment and destruction, were made to labor under the authority of the king, building the very temple meant to glorify the God they opposed. It was a dramatic reversal. Darkness made to serve the light, evil enslaved to holiness. But this was only the beginning. Solomon's encounters with Ornius opened the gates to a much larger, more terrifying reality. That the spiritual world is far more structured and far more interactive than we dare to believe. The ring was more than a tool. It was a key to a hidden dimension where power, both divine and diabolical, could be confronted face to face. And Solomon, armed by heaven, would soon become the architect not just of a temple, but of a cosmic reckoning. Upon encountering the dark force tormenting the young worker, Solomon did not act impulsively or in fear. He waited and received a divine answer. The sacred ring, delivered by the Archangel Michael, came with a crystal-clear mandate. With this ring, Solomon was to seal, subdue, and command any and all demonic powers he faced. This was not just a defensive artifact, it was a divine declaration of war, a weapon of spiritual conquest. From that moment forward, the rules of engagement between light and darkness were permanently rewritten. With unwavering resolve and the ring of divine authority now adorning his hand, Solomon summoned the shadowy being, Ornius. The moment the demon stood before him, its resistance melted beneath the ring's radiance. Bound by celestial law, Ornius was forced into full submission. Solomon did not simply banish the creature, he interrogated it thoroughly. He demanded its name, its origin, its allegiances, and its mission against mankind. What unfolded was more than a confrontation. It was a revelation. Ornius, stripped of power and forced to speak, confessed its identity as a demon of the air, whose primary role was to torment humans and seduce them into star worship, a direct strike against the commandments of God. Its ancient work had always been deception, to lead humanity away from the Creator and into the spiritual snares of idolatry, cloaked in celestial fascination. But Ornius was only the beginning. With this first demonic confession came a tidal wave of opportunity. Solomon, now fully aware of the ring's capabilities, began a divine campaign unlike anything the ancient world had seen. He wasn't merely neutralizing threats, he was capturing them, learning from them, and bending them to the purposes of heaven. Each demon once summoned was interrogated thoroughly, their secrets extracted, their tactics exposed, their weaknesses catalogued. They were then assigned tasks that no human could perform, lifting impossibly heavy stones, transporting massive timbers, shaping materials with unnatural precision. The first temple, which would stand as a sacred dwelling place of God among men, was, in part, constructed by the very forces that once opposed its existence. Under Solomon's rule, these demons became unwilling laborers in the greatest holy project of all time. Yet they remained enemies, not friends, not allies, but bound adversaries under divine control. And Solomon? He was no longer just a king of Israel. He had become a spiritual tactician, a master of demonic hierarchies, an unparalleled authority on the unseen powers that sought to influence mankind. His interrogation methods weren't fueled by cruelty, but by divine justice, a precise, ordered exposure of the kingdom of darkness, one name, one secret at a time. Each confrontation expanded his knowledge. Each demon revealed another piece of the puzzle. Solomon's understanding of the spiritual realm grew into something vast, structured, and terrifyingly detailed. He wasn't operating on guesses or legends. He was building a manual of demonology through first-hand encounters. The ring granted him dominion, but it was his relentless pursuit of truth and clarity that forged him into something far more rare. A king who ruled not just by sword or scroll, but by spiritual supremacy. The very core of the Testament of Solomon lies not just in its supernatural drama or theological mystery, but in its raw and unsettling documentation of demonic intelligence. This ancient text does not merely recount spiritual victories, it compiles them with clinical precision. Solomon's methods were systematic, almost surgical. Each demon was not only bound, but studied. He extracted their truths with a calm authority, documenting their names, their spheres of power, their corrupting tactics, and most importantly, the exact vulnerabilities that could strip them of influence. The result is more than a historical account. It is a strategic manual of spiritual warfare, a grimoire in the truest and most forbidden sense. Let us now venture into the chilling registry of these entities, the dark cast of infernal beings who stood before the wisest king, only to be unmasked, broken, and made to serve. Ornias, Buscapé, the first to fall, and perhaps the most emblematic of Solomon's dominion. Ornias was an aerial spirit, elusive, intelligent, and predatory. It tormented a temple worker by draining his energy through his right hand, causing both physical decay and emotional despair. But its damage was not limited to the body. It sowed spiritual rot as well, seducing men into the worship of stars, embedding ancient idolatry into human culture under the guise of cosmic reverence. Sphere of influence, physical affliction, spiritual confusion, celestial idolatry, tactics, energy draining, astral manipulation, seductive doctrine, weakness, the seal of Solomon's divine ring, absolute subjugation upon contact, judgment. Solomon enslaved him to cut and transport stones for the temple's foundation, Beelzebub, a name that still echoes through occult traditions and demonology. This entity presented himself not merely as a demon, but as the prince of all demons, second only to Lucifer. He claimed dominion over the spirits of the air and revealed his role in leading men astray through pride and false divination. His confession was bold and revealing, exposing the celestial rebellion's underlying motive, to challenge the authority of God by mimicking divine prophecy and corrupting human insight. Sphere of influence, false prophecy, pride, aerial dominion, tactics, possession of oracles, corruption of visions, exaltation of self-weakness, invocation of the Most High, and the power of the ring judgment. Bound and forced to explain the hierarchy of the infernal realm to Solomon Asmodeus, a fearsome spirit of lust and destruction, notorious for his appearance in other apocryphal texts, such as the Book of Tobit. Asmodeus confessed to inciting marital discord, lustful obsession, and violence born from jealousy. His hatred for marriage and union was profound, and his influence often resulted in broken homes and shattered relationships. Sphere of influence, lust, wrath, marital sabotage, tactics, obsession, temptation, relational ruin, weakness, fish liver smoke, as later confirmed in Tobit, and the authority of the ring judgment, forced to labor by shaping temple bronze and detailing his own history of ruin, Enepsigos. This was a particularly disturbing entity, a female spirit who claimed to take multiple forms, including that of the ancient triple goddess. She confessed to changing with the lunar phases and having deep ties to witchcraft and necromancy. Enepsigos symbolized the seductive, intersection of the feminine and the arcane, a spirit who thrived on manipulation, seduction, and ritualistic deception. Sphere of influence: witchcraft, lunar cycles, necromancy, tactics, shape-shifting, illusion, blood rituals. Weakness: the invocation of the Alpha and Omega. Judgment: chained and ordered to reveal secrets of dark rites and celestial cycles. Each demon Solomon confronted was more than a threat. It was a node in a vast and intelligent network of spiritual corruption. The depth of their confessions reads not like myth, but like psychological and theological warfare, precise, cold, and disturbingly rational. Solomon's ring didn't just enslave, it exposed. It turned lies into truth under divine compulsion. Through this process, Solomon didn't just build a temple. He mapped the enemy's kingdom. He pulled back the curtain on a realm most dare not even acknowledge, and in doing so, became the most formidable spiritual tactician in biblical history. Beelzebul, Baalzebub, Lord of the Flies. Among all the entities that stood before Solomon, few carried such commanding authority and cosmic defiance as Beelzebul. He introduced himself with chilling clarity, the Prince of Demons. His presence radiated both intellectual cunning and spiritual defiance. Beelzebul did not operate in the shadows. He orchestrated global corruption from high places, stoking the fires of war, tyranny, and false religion. He proudly confessed to subverting kings, corrupting priests, and drawing whole nations into the worship of demons under the veil of political power and spiritual rebellion. His influence infected societies like a plague, rotting them from within through control, destruction, and blasphemy. Sphere of influence: tyranny, global conflict, demonic religion, systemic corruption, tactics, political infiltration, manipulation of rulers, spiritual subversion. Weakness: the supreme authority of the cross of Christ, an overwhelming force of judgment against his dominion. Judgment: Solomon compelled him to prophesy his own doom, eternal chains in the deepest abyss, a divine sentence awaiting the once proud prince of darkness, Onoskelis. A deceptive and haunting presence, Onoskelis emerged not with thunder, but with seduction. Her voice soft, her form enticing yet grotesque upon closer view. She appeared as a beautiful woman, but her legs betrayed her, twisted and equine, a disturbing symbol of unnatural desire. Dwelling in shadowy caverns, she confessed her mission: to invade the dreams of men, to inject sexual perversion into their subconscious, and to draw them into acts of idolatry through lustful delusions. Her attacks were quiet but devastating. Moral erosion disguised as pleasure, sanctity dismantled in the night. Sphere of influence: sexual corruption, dream manipulation, idolatrous seduction. Tactics: night terrors, erotic dreams, spiritual seduction. Weakness: the sacred name of God, and the spiritual discipline of purity and chastity. Judgment: Solomon ordered her to twist ropes for the temple, a symbolic reversal of her manipulation, now bound to create instead of corrupt. Asmodeus entered Solomon's court with defiance and disdain. Known from the Book of Tobit as the destroyer of marriages, his confession before Solomon only expanded his vile resume. He was the architect of lustful obsession, marital betrayal, uncontrolled rage, and burning envy. But deeper still, he revealed his ability to fracture the human mind, causing mental torment, emotional collapse, and even madness. His power was not just in causing people to sin, but in unraveling their very ability to think clearly, to love, to stay whole. He boasted of tearing homes apart and driving men to insanity. Sphere of influence: lust, jealousy, violence, divorce, insanity. Tactics: temptation, emotional destabilization, psychological attacks. Weakness: the intervention of the Archangel Raphael, and the holy aroma of frankincense, a symbol of sanctification judgment. Solomon bound him to carry clay for the temple's sacred vessels, the destroyer of homes, now laboring to build God's Obizuth, often associated with Leviathan or Lilith-like figures. There are few confessions in the Testament as harrowing as that of Obizuth. This demonic female entity did not hide behind ambiguity. She plainly admitted to haunting pregnant women, strangling children, and extinguishing life at its most innocent stages. Whether through miscarriage, sudden infant death, or barrenness, her mission was clear: prevent life, deny joy, and frustrate the fruitfulness ordained by God. Her appearance was wild, her hair unbound and swirling, her eyes filled with cold malice. She embodied grief, fear, and the deep trauma of inexplicable loss. Sphere of influence: abortion, infant death, sterility, prenatal disease, tactics, nighttime assault, spiritual strangulation, generational curses. Weakness: the intervention of the Archangel Raphael and the fervent prayers of the righteous. A mother's cry reaching heaven could sever her whole judgment. Solomon bound her by the hair and suspended her in the sky, a public and symbolic execution of her crimes against life. Together, these testimonies form a terrifying mosaic of spiritual warfare. The demons Solomon bound and exposed were not creatures of myth, but intelligent, strategic entities with clear missions to destroy humanity from the inside out. Their patterns are eerily familiar, echoing across history, manifesting even now in politics, media, culture, and personal lives. The Testament of Solomon doesn't just recount ancient battles, it maps the strategies of hell itself. And through this divine interrogation, the hidden blueprints of evil were pulled into the light, revealing not just what the enemy does, but how it can be stopped. Ephippus emerged not as a slithering shadow or deceiving spirit, but as a towering horseman of overwhelming force, his very presence shaking the ground beneath him. This demon wielded immense physical power, capable of moving mountains and rupturing the earth with earthquakes. His domain was the violent reshaping of creation, not through fire or deception, but through brute, cataclysmic force. When summoned and bound by Solomon, Ephippus was forced to do the very thing he once perverted: build instead of destroy. He became instrumental in transporting and placing the enormous stones that formed the foundation of the first temple, demonstrating the divine irony of God, turning destruction into service, chaos into construction. Sphere of influence: earthquakes, geological upheaval, manipulation of mass and matter tactics, seismic destruction, intimidation, brute disruption of human civilization. Weakness: the power of a specific celestial body and the intervention of a superior heavenly authority. Judgment: Solomon commanded him to lift and set the heaviest stones of the temple, making him a beast of burden for divine architecture. Cariots did not strike with fists or flames, but with the silent weight of the unseen. He appeared as a sullen male spirit, enveloped in an aura of dread and despair. This demon's craft was deeply psychological. He stole voices, clouded minds, and dragged his victims into suffocating pits of depression. He sowed mental fog and spiritual fatigue, leaving men disoriented, silent, and hopeless. His attack was slow, suffocating, and invisible, making him one of the most dangerous forces in the spiritual realm. Solomon's encounter with Cariotes revealed the reality of mental torment as a weapon of darkness. Sphere of influence: confusion, speechlessness, anxiety, prolonged depression, tactics, mental paralysis, spiritual exhaustion, emotional drowning, weakness. The intervention of the Archangel Gabriel and the proclamation of divine names imbued with authority judgment. Solomon subjected him to confinement and subjugation, breaking his silence with the power of sacred words. Rabdos entered Solomon's court as a spirit of physical infirmity. Unlike the demons of thunderous power or seductive manipulation, Rabdos inflicted slow, grinding suffering, stiffness in joints, chronic aches, and immobility. His goal was simple but cruel: to hinder human productivity, worship, and purpose by breaking the body and trapping the spirit in pain. His presence revealed the spiritual dimension behind seemingly natural ailments, showing how pain itself can become a tool of oppression. Rabdos boasted of afflicting the laborers, seeking to slow the temple's progress, but instead he became another captive within it. Sphere of influence, joint stiffness, physical limitation, chronic pain, tactics, restriction of motion, fatigue, subtle physical deterioration, weakness, the radiant intervention of the Archangel Uriel, and the use of sacred chants spoken with divine alignment. Judgment. Solomon neutralized his affliction and used him as a servant, reversing his crippling influence by placing him under divine command. Each of these demons, whether through brute force, psychological decay, or slow physical deterioration, represent different modes of spiritual warfare. Yet all were brought into submission by the divine authority placed upon Solomon. These aren't just ancient tales, they are spiritual archetypes, living blueprints of how darkness operates in silence, in violence, in pain. And through Solomon's story, we are shown that even the fiercest spiritual forces, when confronted with divine power and holy wisdom, can be chained, compelled, and even repurposed for the glory of God. These examples represent merely a glimpse into the vast and terrifying demonic hierarchy unveiled in the Testament of Solomon. The text unfolds like a spiritual codex, exposing, with alarming specificity, the identities, strategies, and vulnerabilities of dozens upon dozens of demonic entities. Each spirit is methodically interrogated and catalogued by Solomon, their malice laid bare, their tactics exposed, their weaknesses revealed. The picture that emerges is one of astonishing complexity, a fully structured kingdom of darkness, organized, intelligent, and ruthlessly committed to the corruption and subjugation of the human soul. Yet what is perhaps most disturbing is not the presence of this malevolent spiritual network, but its invisibility to the average person. This war is not waged with swords or armies, but in dreams, in sickness, in temptation, in despair. It unfolds silently behind the veil of our material world. The Testament of Solomon is not simply a lost relic or esoteric curiosity. It is a spiritual manifesto, a document of cosmic confrontation. It is a narrative that transcends ancient history and erupts into the present with brutal relevance. Through its stories, it compels us to reconsider the spiritual forces at work in our world today, hidden behind our modern distractions and technological illusions. The text suggests that, while the faces of these entities may change across cultures and eras, their methods and goals remain horrifyingly consistent. And just as Solomon confronted them in his time, we too are participants, whether knowingly or not, in a vast, unrelenting war for the soul. The nature of power and its peril. Perhaps the most haunting message woven into this ancient account is the nature of power itself and the cost of wielding it. Solomon was not a sorcerer. He did not practice witchcraft or engage in occult incantations. His dominion over demons was rooted in obedience, in a sacred covenant with the divine. His power came not from pride, but from submission. The ring was not a weapon forged by man, but a tool handed down by heaven. It was a holy trust. But with that trust came temptation. For all his wisdom, for all his divine favor, Solomon was still a man. And as his kingdom flourished, so too did his pride. In time, the very forces he once commanded began to seduce him. He tolerated their presence. He built altars to their idols. He allowed his foreign wives to sway his heart away from the God who had gifted him everything. In seeking to harness the forbidden beyond the boundaries God had set, Solomon crossed a threshold, and the consequences were catastrophic. This is not merely a tale of ancient failure, it is a warning echoing through the ages. That spiritual authority, when divorced from humility, becomes a snare. That proximity to power does not guarantee faithfulness, and that the higher one climbs in divine revelation, the more devastating the fall if one turns away. The Testament of Solomon closes not with triumphant legacy, but with solemn regret. It reminds us that the greatest threat to a God-given mission is not always the enemy without, but the pride within. Ultimately, the story of Solomon is not just about demons being defeated. It is about the terrifying truth that even those entrusted with the highest light can fall into the deepest darkness if they forget the source of their power. Demonic tactics, ancient and ever-present. The vivid revelations documented in the Testament of Solomon expose not only the identities of ancient demons, but their terrifyingly timeless strategies. These entities are not relics of a primitive past, nor are their schemes confined to ancient kingdoms. Rather, they are cunning architects of human ruin, ever evolving, ever adapting. Their lust for idolatry now wears modern masks: celebrity obsession, materialism, and ideological extremism. Their fomenting of wars finds expression in geopolitical conflicts, civil unrest, and the corrosion of truth. They exploit lust through digital saturation, distort truth with sophisticated misinformation, and weaponize envy and depression with surgical precision. The demonic kingdom has not grown weaker with time, it has simply become more covert. The very tactics Solomon uncovered centuries ago continue unabated, now dressed in the garb of progress and civilization. We are not facing new enemies, we are facing old ones with new disguises. Identifying weaknesses, a key to victory. Perhaps the most revolutionary insight from Solomon's divine assignment was this: no demon is invincible. Every single entity, no matter how fearsome, possessed a fatal vulnerability. Some could be defeated by invoking the name of a specific angel, others by calling upon the divine name of God, still others by enacting virtuous discipline or maintaining ritual purity. This reality flips the narrative. Darkness is not sovereign. It is fragile in the presence of holiness. This mirrors a central truth of Scripture. Believers are not powerless victims, but spiritual warriors equipped by God with weapons that transcend human strength. Solomon's ring was symbolic of divine authority. Today, that same authority is accessed through Christ, whose victory over darkness was absolute. The Apostle Paul's list of spiritual armor in Ephesians 6 is more than poetic metaphor. It is the believer's inheritance. The Testament's ancient catalogue becomes a practical guide for our modern warfare, proving that spiritual discernment, purity, and truth remain the most lethal weapons against the unseen enemy. The hidden secrets of the temple. Among the most shocking revelations of the text is the idea that demons, beings of pure rebellion, were compelled to assist in constructing the temple of God, the sacred epicenter of divine worship. On the surface, this appears contradictory. How could such unholy forces participate in such a holy task? But in reality, this is a profound theological declaration of God's supreme authority. Nothing, no matter how dark, can resist his sovereign will. The fact that these entities were forced into divine service under the command of a righteous man illustrates a truth echoed throughout Scripture. Even what is meant for evil, God bends into submission for good. The very stones laid by unclean hands became part of the holiest sanctuary on earth. This is not a tale of compromise. It is one of conquest. The temple stood not in spite of demonic opposition, but because their strength was seized and redirected by divine mandate. Evil did not help build God's house willingly. It was dragged into obedience. That ancient reality serves as a sobering yet empowering reminder that God's purposes will always prevail, and no force, no matter how vile, can withstand his decree. The Testament of Solomon, whether regarded as canonical or apocryphal, provides a unique and unsettling window into the granular reality of spiritual warfare. It exposes the individual nature of our spiritual adversaries and illuminates the specific tools and knowledge bestowed upon humanity to effectively combat them. It serves as a vivid, urgent reminder of the constant vigilance required to navigate the complexities of the spiritual realm. The Testament of Solomon, though an ancient and often debated text, is a powerful and compelling narrative that confronts us with the undeniable reality of the demonic kingdom and the profound wisdom, as well as the inherent dangers, of engaging with it. It serves as a stark, timeless reminder that divine authority is the only true power that can ultimately subdue the forces of darkness, and that our greatest protection and ultimate victory reside in our unwavering faithfulness and absolute surrender to God. If you feel drawn to unravel these deeper, often uncomfortable mysteries, if you are called to equip yourself with the hidden knowledge that has been suppressed, and if you are determined to prepare your spirit for what is yet to come, like this video to help us spread this vital truth to even more seekers around the globe. Your engagement fuels our mission. Leave a profound comment below with your insights, your pressing questions, or perhaps the specific demon or revelation from the Testament of Solomon that most deeply intrigued or shocked you. Engage in the discussion. Share this video widely with friends, family, and your community who are earnestly seeking the truth and urgently need discernment in these turbulent times. And of course, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you are immediately notified and never miss any of our next deep dives into biblical mysteries, ancient texts, and urgent prophetic truths. The revelation continues. Seek the truth relentlessly. Live by it courageously. Share it boldly. Solomon's ring may symbolize power and peril, but true authority ultimately resides in knowing the one who bestowed it.